If everyone could take their seats, we're going to start in, well, we're supposed to start now. I'll give you 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay, we're going to call the meeting of the City of Bloomington Council Committee of the Whole to order. And I wonder if, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Lauer,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Milamwe,
Here.
Alderman Stearns,
Here.
Alderman Painter,
Here.
Alderman Schmidt,
Here.
Alderman Black,
Here.
Alderman Howman,
Here.
Alderman Fruin,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We're going to start with our public comment section this evening. And again, for public comments, it's the policy of the council not to respond to people. This is basically up to 3 minutes where people can come and comment on any particular issue. And I'm going to start with Alton Franklin.
My name is Alton Franklin. I live at 508 Patterson Drive here in Bloomington, Illinois. God, I really don't know what to say. I am disgusted and appalled at the recent turn of events. To find out not only was something not said, but that the item that it was connected with has been discussed for over 2 years. For 2 years. And there was no thought given, especially given the impassioned speech, no other way to put it. When the mayor has to cut somebody off, it leads you to believe that somebody's got a rather deep and abiding interest. And quite frankly, given the recent things that I've said, I just don't believe it. It just amazes me that I can stand up here and talk about integrity, about honor, and then to see this happen, it strains my credibility that anybody would even still sit in that seat after having committed what I consider a heinous act of betrayal. When you are a trustee, you are entrusted by somebody to look to their interest above all others. That's what trustee means. As a council person, as an alderman for the city of Bloomington and the amazing citizens, to do something like that is just beyond my ken. I don't know how anybody could sleep. I don't know how anybody could deal with themselves, look in the mirror, or do anything. Sometime back when Mayor Stockton was still in the seat up there where Mayor Renner is now. As a result of what I termed incompetence and an inability to lead effectively, I called upon him to resign. I'm doing the same thing now. The councilman who committed that act needs to resign and slink away into some dark corner and hope that he can somehow in his later life redeem himself. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Bowles.
Hi, my name is Phil Bowles. I live at 1 Palm Court in Bloomington. I own Muggsy's Pub on 1310 North Main Street in Bloomington. What I want to talk to you about for the next couple minutes here is about the video gaming suggestion to collect fees. I do oppose that. I took a look at the stuff that you guys provided on the addendum. We have an article here from Government Finance Review. We have some literature here from West Jordan, Utah, literature from City of San Diego, California, Council Policy, and then something from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And in looking at these articles, basically what it says is it talks about user fees. And the thing about the gambling thing is I want to know what the user fees are. When I went to the Liquor Commission meeting a couple weeks ago, we talked about, there's a little bit of a suggestion that there was fees due to gambling machines, and I just really don't see what the costs are to gambling machines. The amount of income that has come in from the gambling machines for the city of Bloomington is $755,887.66. That's the amount of money that you've collected since it started about September of 2000, 2 years ago, through October. That's quite a bit of money. The food and beverage tax that is paid is about $2.1 million a year, times 2, 4.2, plus 700,000. You're collecting about $5 million a year from our industry, which I think is a pretty good chunk of change. We are facing the possibility of minimum wage going up from $8.25 to $10 as far as the advisory referendum is concerned. Some of us are facing costs with the Affordable Care Act, in which we have to provide insurance for more people. Although there might be a little bit of argument there for that's a good thing, as most people know, health costs have gone up quite a bit. Myself and my wife, our costs, if we would have kept the same plan that we had, would have been $1,000 a month more. So you're interested in a gambling fee, but we've got lotto and we've got scratch cards, and I don't think there's any fees there that the city of Bloomington collects. You're interested in user fees, and here lately we've had bicycle lanes, we've had lots of money spent on studies, plans, trails, etc. I'm not here to downgrade bicyclists, but maybe you should have some user fees there because they're definitely using it. Now, as far as the video gaming is concerned, when I went to that Liquor Commission meeting, there's a police officer here that said that he had absolutely 0 calls on issues with gambling machines. So I just really question where the costs are with the video gaming machines and why you feel like you need to collect a fee. Being in small business is not exactly easy. It's rewarding at times, but it is very, there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of costs that come up to us all the time. Myself, at my business, I've got about 6 air conditioners on top of my roof. And 2 years ago, last time I replaced one, it was $6,000. We have a lot of costs that you don't see in this particular economy. What a lot of people have done is we're trying to hold the line on what we charge our customers. And the reason that we're doing that is because it's tough for everybody out there. So that's really about all I have to say. But, you know, the argument for you need user fees because you have associated costs, I don't see the costs. And I would challenge you to provide me where your costs and user fees should be justified. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gary Lambert.
Evening. I'll make this quick. There's been a lot of publicity the past week regarding the McGraw addition. There's been a lot of arguments both for and against. Some of the arguments in favor of it were that In fact, Central Catholic would only be using a portion of the field, and only during certain times of the year and certain hours. Nearly 50 years ago, I took a couple of classes at Bradley, a couple of law classes, and a term that I remember is four corners of the law. Basically what that says is, in enforcing a contract, or in this case a lease, any verbal negotiations that take place during the construction of a contract have absolutely no bearing on the contract itself. The entire meeting has to be on the four corners of the pieces of the paper. What was signed last week by the council was a lease for the entirety of the 4 acres, and that they would have priority usage, no limitations on season, time, no limitations on the amount. So even though there may be the best of intentions, what the contract states is that they have complete control over it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since we've obviously had a pretty dramatic situation over the last week, and we've had a couple of people comment on this, I don't usually go back and forth with citizens, but I just want to clarify what did happen and what has not happened. This has been something that has been since the Capitol bill almost 5 years ago, and it is something that the executive session, we had executive sessions on since I was mayor, and there were definitely lots of different ideas and perspectives of members of the council, and it was cleared a week ago when we had the 5-4 vote. Now, what has happened is there have been no documents signed. So it's, if you can call it a de facto veto or a pocket veto, I did not sign the documents. We will reconsider it 1 week from tonight at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting. And it will be the first item on the agenda 1 week from tonight for reconsideration of that vote. Okay? Just to let everybody know what's going on. Thank you. Moving right along to some of the more fun parts of being mayor. As everyone knows, we had a Citizens Academy, the first Citizens Academy. This is certainly part of our attempt to be as transparent and open as possible, bringing people inside the City Hall. And we had a really great group of people. And Gary Lambert, who was just up and spoke, was mayor at some point. And I understand you did an outstanding job. You got rave reviews. And so I do this evening have the honor to give all of you certificates. And actually, it has my really, really bad signature on it, too. So that's the downside. Otherwise, these look really good. They're really cool. They've got the city's, seal on them and everything. And I'm going to start with...
Mayor, could I just...
Yeah.
Don't mean to interrupt, but I'd
Sure.
like to have Nora Dukowitz come up and assist you with this.
Thank
Nora,
you so much.
And,
Yes.
and if you don't mind... Could Nora just take a few minutes and talk about, how successful this academy was, and just give everyone a kind of an overview of just what was involved over the last couple of months of this academy. Then we can go to that presentation. Nora?
I'd be happy to. It's my pleasure and honor to be here this evening with the inaugural participants in Bloomington 101, our Citizens Academy. This was a new venture for us. As you know, it was a pilot program, and I think everyone was a little bit, feeling out how it might go. It could go great, or who knows. But I think that these participants, as well as the staff that have participated in this program, think it's been a great success. We've spent 10 weeks together from August till the first week of November learning about a different department every week, from police and fire to parks and recreation. As the mayor indicated, some of them even got to sit in your seats and make some of the decisions you have to deal with on a week-to-week basis. They got into the budget, they asked questions. It was really rewarding from the feedback I've received for the participants, but also for the staff that was able to participate and show these people what they're passionate about, what they do every day behind the scenes with the city. So it's been my pleasure to get to know this group of participants, and I hope this is a program we can continue in the future. I'm very delighted by the response from the community, as well as the support of City Manager Hales. So thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Nora. And if you come on over here and you can, I'll be on this side of the diocese. You are over there. If you'll come on up when I read your name if you're here. Josh Barnett. Andrew is it Bloomhart. Sorry, Andrew. I know she's here. Bev Edgerton. Oh, that. Another familiar face, Sue Feldkamp. Come on down. Michael Gorman. Aaron Halliday. Alicia Henry. Gisely Hinshaw? I don't believe she's here this evening. She's not here this evening. Okay, well, we still have this, and I'll give you that. All right. Oh, we know you're here. Gary Lambert. Rhonda Massey? She's not? Oh, give her a hand. Thanks. Tamika Matthews? David Durley? Oh, is it? Oh, that's a P. Oh, what I get? Have glasses and don't use them. Thank you. And this is James Ray Rybershek. James Ray? Well, he's not here to mispronounce his name. Anyway, okay. And Kenneth Sampin? He's not? All right. Paula Stubfeld? Ann Sullivan? Ann, are you here? Belinda Trinnell? Pastor Peter Weeks? Thank you so much.
So are they going to help us balance the budget?
We just had a question. Are you going to help us balance the budget? We're definitely looking for ideas.
Oh, what a great resource.
Thank you so much, Nora, for making all this happen. It's just a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all for participating. And thank you, Mr. Hales. Thanks. Okay, now we move on to the Committee of the Whole minutes from the October 21st, 2014 meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes, or are there corrections?
Make a motion to approve the mayor.
Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Black with his beard growing. Any comments, corrections? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Okay. There are 9 ayes and no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much. All right. Moving right along, we move to item 6A, the Bloomington Communication Center Operations Report, presentation by Mike Leaf. And we budgeted approximately 60 minutes for this, 30 minutes for discussion, and 30 minutes for question and answer. And then, of course, we have our second item afterwards. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Hales, our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, tonight I'm pleased to introduce to you Mike Leaf. And if we can have Mike come down here. Mike is a retired police captain from the city of Moline. However, he's had a second career, and that has been one he's worked across the nation, helping not only cities but other agencies and groups establish modern, high-tech communication centers and dealing with everything, whether it be 911, E911, et cetera, et cetera. This is a gentleman who has spent, I think it was 4 or 5 years in New York City, helping them establish their communication center. He's a past president of the National Emergency Number Association. And why is that agency important? This agency has been very instrumental across the nation in helping provide recommendations, standards, principles, what communities at the local and state level need to do to help implement E911 and even now the next generation 911 systems. Also, one reason we wanted to have Mike come and assist us on this study is that he co-authored the original 911 legislation in the state of Illinois. So he was there, he helped write it, and then following that, he spent considerable time going around the state and several opportunities here in the city of Bloomington, going back when we were just, as a county and local entities, setting up our ETSB board and beginning to look how we can maybe work together in implementing this new technology. I could go on and on, but suffice it to say that he has just had a strong second career being an individual that has helped many communities as they set up these critical life safety communication centers. Just also want to just briefly mention, and Mike will get into this a little bit, the origins of this particular study go back several years when council members were asking staff to undertake a study to determine, have we achieved what we wanted to with the establishment of the City of Bloomington Communication Center? Furthermore, should there be at a very high level consideration about possibly reconsolidating with the McLean County Communication Center? And those questions continue. We wanted to make sure that as we brought to you, this is not the definitive, end-all, final sort of study, but it is a preliminary study that looked at these issues and tried at a very high level say, where are we today? In its regards to communication center, both us and Metcom, and there was a lot of data we gathered. So we thought that this would be a very good study to bring to the council to hopefully help answer some of the questions that have been asked since the City of Bloomington withdrew from Metcom as to whether or not should we reconsolidate, and if so, why, as well as is there value and benefit in the current physical arrangement. And last, I just want to make this key point. In my career, I've seen a lot of examples of so-called regionalization, consolidations, efforts for shared services, trying to, achieve economies of scale so that every entity doesn't have to have its own of whatever that may be. But I will say this, one of the greatest obstacles and barriers to successful regionalization efforts is governance and getting your governance policies right. To decide who controls, who has authority, how does everyone work together, and the second is funding. How do you deal with the allocation of costs to all parties of a regional operation, in this case, Metcom? So as you hear from Mike, and when he's finished, I do want to come back and touch on those briefly, But I believe that we were extremely well served at a very, very reasonable cost to have Mr. Leaf come in and do this objective outside assessment of where we stand today and to offer his recommendations. So with that, Mayor and Council, I'd like to turn to Mike Leaf for his presentation and highlights. And I do want you to know we're not going to be taking 30 minutes. I've reviewed this with Mike, and I think he has something, a little bit more. But we do feel that this is a very complex topic. So we wanted to make sure tonight there was opportunities for a lot of questions, discussions, and answers. So with that, Mr. Lee.
I'm sure that's appreciated by all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hale. I appreciate the very kind words. I will not take a whole lot of your time. I've put together a very short PowerPoint presentation just to hit the highlights of the document with the understanding that this whole study was set at a very, very high level. What the objectives were, as you can see, Bloomington wanted to decide, as Mr. Hale indicated, should Metcom and the city of Bloomington recombine into a consolidated center. To go through that exercise, I should also give you some backup information, and that is when we had first initially got this legislation passed about 1987-88, I was president of Illinois NENA, as Mr. Hale indicated, and Mike Mose, who is the then director of the 911 system, or 911 office for the state of Illinois, and I made about 14, 15 presentations around the state. In fact, we made a couple of them here in McLean County. And at that point in time in history, McLean County was very interested in being part of and being involved in having a surcharge placed on a phone bill to pay for the technology for 911. The city of Bloomington, for whatever reasons, at that point in time in history, did not wish to participate. We came back a couple of times because they asked for other additional information, and that it didn't happen, which is how you got into Metcom to begin with. So that's where, to start with that. So what we did to review where you are today and what would best serve you today from a very high level was we met with the Illinois Commerce Commission, the current director, Marcy Schroll, and laid out what some of the issues were that we had. And one of the issues that the city of Bloomington has is revenue sharing with the ETSB. As you know, you all have a $1.25 surcharge attached to your phone bill, which is part of the legislation we wrote. And all those funds go to the ETSB. And the ETSB, by design, is an autonomous board and can do and enter into contracts as they wish and direct where the monies go. The intent of the legislation was those monies were supposed to go exclusively, or primarily, I shouldn't say exclusively, primarily for the funding of technology, computer systems, 911 systems, radio systems, logging and recording, UPS, anything in the back room or anything that requires to support a call for service coming in from a citizen. That was the purpose of the legislation. So an issue always has been is where is this money going? It's going to the ETSB. Well, when you left the ETSB, now there's been some back and forth over time, and I don't want to get into all of that. So what we talked to the SEC about, ICC rather, was a couple of things. Primarily, one was revenue sharing, and that is kind of a dead-end street. We talked to them about McLean County versus the current configuration of two centers, and identifying ways to improve services and other things that could be done. But one of the focus was, what can Bloomington do with the Commerce Commission to retain some funding from the ETSB? And are we in the best position, are you in the best position being as an independent entity or as being part of the Metcom scenario? What I just have a couple of quick overviews for some of you who may not have been in a comm center, just that couple pictures of what your comm center looks like, because sometimes council members don't have that opportunity. And to be honest with you, I've been in hundreds of them across the country. You have an excellent center. It's well maintained. It was well designed. So that's something that you should be very proud of, quite frankly. You can support and back up Metcom very equitably with your configuration and equipment you have and the space you have. And that's all a good thing that we'll get into. You currently have a New World CAD system, and you utilize a shared record system with the county. You are part of the STARCOM system, STARCOM being the 800 megahertz radio system that the state police have, which is a huge thing for you because you now have interoperability not only with the county and the state police, but other agencies across the state of Illinois that are part of the STARCOM system. That's another positive thing. You're on the same commonality for communication. That's not a universal thing. That truly isn't. The other thing that's important for you to know is that in March, the ETSB did approve a contract with Frontier Telephone that's going to bring you into the next generation of 911, which is called NG, Next Generation. Not too hard to figure that out. And the value of the equipment that the ETSB is paying for that will be installed in Bloomington is at $320,000, and included beyond that will be the annual maintenance and upgrades to that system for the duration of the equipment. And again, this is for your edification, a picture, just a couple pictures of your equipment room. Again, I've been in hundreds of them. You've got a nice equipment room. They may not sound important to you, but it's extremely important. You've got good grouting. You've got good backup emergency power. You've got good ventilation, good HVAC. All of that is critical for technology, as you may know. You probably do know. This is a quick overview of your total phone calls for service received by Bloomington in 2013. Grand total of phone calls handled by your comm center, 113,757 calls versus Metcom call center activity of 117,883 calls. But you have to understand under Metcom, the 50,368 wireless phone calls, a large percentage of those are forwarded on to the city of Bloomington for dispatch and handling. The way 911 wireless calls are handled today is not by geographic. It's typically done different ways until the technology completely catches up, where it's not done by cell tower or general location of where you're located. And that all that technology is not perfect yet.
If I could just clarify that. It was my understanding that when I was on the county board, when City of Bloomington went it alone, that, in my understanding today, if I have a heart attack and I dial 911 and I'm outside of Bloomington, I get Metcom and they can send somebody out and dispatch them immediately, but not if I'm in Bloomington.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So when you talked about the 911 routing, I'm a little confused.
Currently, all the wireless 911 calls go to Metcom initially. When they see where it's coming from and they identify that it's a call for Bloomington, it's transferred to Bloomington. That scenario is going to be enhanced and improved with the NG system because essentially, and I'll show you a diagram of that here in a minute, you become a single system that is located in diverse locations. Either side of that, in other words, the Bloomington side and the Metcom side are totally independent, but yet they're continually hooked to one another. So it makes it much more efficient and more redundant. But that's coming up. What this slide is just a comparison of the two, so we don't have to go from slide to slide, of total calls for 911 wireless, the non-emergency calls, and total calls between Metcom and the city of Bloomington. And the reason I think this is relevant to what you're doing and what some of the decisions you have to make is that initially, when you were part of Metcom, they had a single person dedicated specifically to the city of Bloomington calls for service. A single person can't handle that kind of volume. You need more bodies than that, quite frankly. Your call volumes in this county are too big, or too gross. The funding is the big issue. In 1990, McLean County passed the funding legislation, and Bloomington didn't pursue it. $1.25 is collected, and in 2006, you elected to move on. This is just a gross picture of what the ETSB budget is for 2013, 2014, with what their anticipated revenues were going to be from ETSB funding, or rather from the surcharge funding and other interests. As you can see, you would have to go through and identify which ones are specifically from the city of Bloomington that are going to the ETSB that you do not directly receive income from in the city of Bloomington. And then the Metcom budget for 2014 gives you a budget breakdown on where their money is going. Again, it's much more detailed, and there's a lot more data that isn't necessary at this point. Quite frankly, I was not chartered to look into and didn't want to, quite honestly. That's something for an accountant to do. We had a very good meeting with the Illinois Commerce Commission, and I've had several other conversations with her via phone and email to discuss what the options for Bloomington were. Is it possible for Bloomington to force the ETSB to give you some of the funding? And quite frankly, you can't force them to do that. That's up to the ETSB. They're an autonomous body, and they can do with the funds as they direct, as long as it's within the guidelines of the law. And the law doesn't allow for just give you a check for X number of dollars every year. They could do that because they have the autonomy to do that as an ETSB. Bloomington could hold a referendum. Could they have their own referendum at this point for a surcharge? And under the current funding legislation, that's not allowed. So you couldn't have a duplicate fund. You could find another way to make up the difference, but that's up to you folks. Taxes are taxes, and no one likes to go there. And how is the ETSB board made up? A representative from each emergency service discipline, a member at large with a minimum of 5 members. The county board appoints these members typically for a term of 3 years. What's typically happened across the state is that once board members get on an ETSB, they have been historically on the ETSB forever. They just continue to reappoint them. Therein lies some issues and concerns. That's an individual county issue. But anyway, that is something that you may wish to address at some point. In addition, the coordinator advised that current arrangement with McLean County and Bloomington and Metcom rather, acting as a backup centers for each other is much better than the prior scenario you had. Because initially you had a dark center, I think it was up in Normal, that sometimes was manned with a person that just kind of sat there and waited for something to happen. The reality of it is, the way, when we get to the bottom of the slide, you'll see I referred to Part 725 of the Illinois Commerce Commission rules governing 911, that each system shall have a backup PSAP which must operate independently from the primary PSAP. And in this case, Metcom's considered the primary because they had the funding, and you were initially there. And have the ability to dispatch either direct or transfer call relay message to the appropriate public safety agency for dispatch. The way you're set up now is ideal, and it complies with Part 725 in total. The Commerce Commission has expressed to us that they'd be extremely reluctant, which is a nice way of saying they're not going to allow you to consolidate into a single center again. And the reason for that is not that they're hard to get along with, it's that they want to have, again, you read Part 725, you must be able to transfer a call to an agency that's capable of handling those calls. Where you're at here in central Illinois, McLean County and Bloomington are the two big dogs, quite frankly. None of your surrounding counties have the capability of supporting or handling your call volumes or Metcom's call volumes in a backup scenario. You are more than capable of handling it for each other, and there's a great relationship between the two centers at this point. The two directors work well together, the two centers work well together, and I think that can continue to be enhanced as you move forward with this whole project. But I think this is a key thing, is that the Commerce Commission probably, and I can't say definitively, obviously, probably will not allow you to combine into a single center again. And then from a more practical standpoint, if you've been to Metcom, it was a good facility when they built it, and it's still operationally a decent facility. But if you look at the size of your comm center and the people you have manning it to effectively operate that center, there's no place to put them at Metcom. It's far and away too small. So the first thing that ETSB and the county would have to do would be to build a new center. There's costs involved with that everyone's going to have to absorb. So that's just, it continues.
But there's also the objection that there's no guarantee. In fact, since there's such bad blood between us and Normal and McLean County over this, that they wouldn't necessarily be happy about it. at the other end?
No, well, from an operational standpoint, from the,
Oh, I meant the political leaders.
oh, political, that could be, I don't
Yeah.
get into that side of the world. I intentionally divorced myself from that. My name is Pontius Pilate, and I've washed my hands. But the reality of it is, you just get in the muck, and I'm not going there. But the reality of it is, on an operational standpoint, between Metcom and Bloomington, it's excellent. Like I said, your two directors work hand and foot together, hand in hand together. They're really good, and they're both very competent people, and they both have the best interest of the people they serve as their primary goal. So that is huge, because that does not happen in all facilities that I've been in. And literally, Mr. Hale alluded to that. I've literally been in hundreds of them around the United States and some in Europe. That's not the case, quite frankly, in many, many cases. So anyway, I digress. In March, the ETSB is going to purchase, and they're going to start installing what, next week, Darren? They're starting the process of putting the equipment in place for NG 911. That's a huge step forward, because what it, in essence, and I'll get to that with the slide, which I think is the next one, the transfer of data between the two PSAPs becomes almost seamless, because they're typically hooked up with a fiber link or a microwave link, so it's extremely quick. You're not going back through tandem offices and switches and slowing the process down. It's much quicker. And because they're linked together and each one is autonomous from the other, or can be autonomous from the other, your data is consistent and it's much more dependable. The new equipment, the NG system that they have today, is able to support a number of call taker positions. I think it's like up to 102 in the basic positions. So you could expand considerably larger than you are with the basic configuration that's going in. And this is kind of what it looks like. You have, this is a typical one. I couldn't get the actual configuration from Frontier. You know, I'm not working for Frontier or for Metcom, so they're not going to give me the data. But this is what a typical NG configuration looks like. Those two large servers are where the camera trunks or where the 911 calls actually go to the telephone network. And coming off of there, there's the 911 workstations for Metcom, the Bloomington 911 workstations, and then they have other nodes for Illinois State University, and then the other three or four, however many you want to work off that wide area network. And that red microwave or fiber link is typically how those two boxes are connected. And either of those boxes can support the whole system. So it's a much more robust and a much more redundant system than you've ever had in the past. So you're already going down the road of sharing technology. You're going down the road of increasing your redundancy. You're going down the road of making and providing better service to the community, both communities or all the communities, because I look at it as one. The county it's everybody in the county. If I'm in the county and I need service, I'm going to call the county. I want a good service. Or if county people are in the city, they want the same thing. That's the goal of all of this stuff. That was the goal of the funding legislation, was to pay for the technology, not the people. People was always, quite seriously, when we wrote this legislation, we intentionally left and prohibited the hiring of personnel or paying for fire trucks or paying for police trucks or that type of stuff out of the budget or out of the allowable expense. We allowed money to pay for directors, allowed money to pay for a person to maintain the alley database, the 911 databases for addresses as they change, but no people. So observations, recommendations. You've got a great working relationship. You've established the decision to separate for a number of reasons. The operational procedures between Bloomington and Metcom are considerably different. Bloomington is a larger, much larger community. Metcom supports a series of smaller ones as well as the sheriff's department. The needs of a small police and fire agency, volunteer agencies, is considerably different than that of a larger department. So there's an issue with who's in charge, and number one, and what kind of procedures are you going to use to dispatch? Bloomington needs to be done this way, and Bloomington Fire needs it to be done this way. but that doesn't meet the needs of what the real fire department guys do or the small fire police departments do. There are a couple different ways of doing business. Even though in law enforcement and the fire world, we all do the same thing, we all do them differently. Again, I've been in hundreds of departments, and we do everything, do the same types of things, but every department has a different twist to how they do it. And that becomes a governance issue when you're combined into a common center, particularly when you're the larger community and you're dealing with smaller communities and you feel or didn't have the control over what the operational or governance issues were. And it goes back to the structure of the ETSB and how that ETSB is run, because they ultimately will control those operational and governance issues. And if you have one voice from the bigger agencies, and you got 5 smaller ones, 5 voices for smaller agencies, it sometimes causes an issue. And that became an issue, I think, initially. All that stuff's gone away from an operational perspective. I don't know about the political perspective, but that's gone away. So, like I said before, the space at Metcom will not allow you to reabsorb or them to reabsorb you. You could not reabsorb them. You would no longer be in compliance with what the ICC would want you to be. In other words, a backup to one another, because you don't have anyone other than each other to back you up. The counties around you can't do that. That's really kind of the bottom line. You need one another, quite frankly, at this point. You need one another. And there's a lot of good things that can come out of that for you. There's a lot of good things that come out of that for you. So that's really the gist of it.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have questions. Oh, Mr. Hales, you want to add something?
Just a few final comments. I just also want to give some background. As most of you know, I only came here just a little under 6 years ago in 2009, prior to this decision. But, during that time, I've also tried to understand a little more of the history of not only the city of Bloomington, how things were done in decades past, but I think it's important to point out that I think there's one thing that has changed drastically, and that is there was a time when, as the city of Bloomington chose to take on financially, maybe solely certain things, whether it be buying and operating a rifle range or a firearms range, going it alone with a communication center. There was a time when money wasn't as much an issue. Now, there was also other cultural issues that came into play. But beginning in 2009, when I got here, money is the issue. It was in 2009. It continues to be the issue. So as we continue to look at, having a collaborative relationship with all these government entities, because it doesn't matter today to our citizens and taxpayers who provides the service. They just want the best service possible, good value for their tax dollars, irrespective, of who provides it. And I think I just have to point out, I found out in 2009 that when the city pulled out of Metcom, we not only burned one bridge, we burned multiple bridges. And we have been about trying to rebuild many of those relationships, since that time. But as you've heard tonight, there's a case that can be made, going forward, that it serves the public safety needs of the county, to possibly have 2 communication centers. I'm not saying that's the end all, that's the final, but you've heard, a good justification for that. On the other hand, as we look at the ETSB board and the telephone surcharges that are paid by our citizens, as well as those in Normal, there is still an inequity, because when we got out of Metcom, and as many of you know, there was no promises made by the ETSB board that they would help fund our operation going into the future. In fact, I heard that, back then that there was a master plan and there was going to just be one comm center. They never could find the master plan. But I think, irregardless of the past, if today and going forward, it makes more sense from public safety to have 2 comm centers, we have a funding issue to deal with, and you've seen some of that information. So again, we're bringing this report to you. Ultimately, at the end of the discussion tonight, what we are asking is, what direction would you like myself and our staff to proceed with? And we can talk about that a little bit later. But let me first turn it back to the mayor and the alderman for questions you might have of Mr. Leaf and this study, which I think is very valuable and beneficial to us.
Mr. Leach, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment, because you mentioned things about consolidated centers versus diverse ones, and I've seen both as well. And that last project that, quite frankly, burned me out was New York. I had to fly back and forth there for 4 years and live in a hotel. But even in New York, where they have a single large 911 center where all the calls go, and they had 5 boroughs, you know, and each borough had its own fire dispatch location. We consolidated a couple of those. But even in New York, they've recognized, and they knew when they built what they call a PSAC, P-A, it's a C on the end instead of a P. They're doing PSAC 2 now because they know they have to have a backup. Who can back up New York City? But they're a prime target for everyone who would want to back up New York City. Is another one. You're talking about politics. In any event, they are in the process of building out PSAC 2. You know, the first PSAC that got built, which included the fire department rehabilitation stuff that I was involved in, was several $billion. And they're spending several billion more, so they have a backup scenario to go to. And that backup will be staffed. In essence, you're doing the same thing in a microcosm here. And again, when I go back to the funding issue, when we wrote the legislation, the intent of the funding was not to buy people, not to buy squad cars or fire trucks. It was to buy technology. That was the intent of the legislation. And it's pretty much stayed that way forever. And that's typically what they've done.
Okay, thanks. And just to clarify, it never ceases to amaze me the extent to which we burned bridges with respect to Metcom. I mean, I was obviously on the county and Normal, and we were all, what in the world are they thinking? But in talking, for example, to Chris Coos about possibly merging some of our fire service in the northeast corner of Bloomington, the 2 fire chiefs got along really well, but there was still some mistrust on the part of others. And certainly my county board colleagues, when they heard that we were thinking about it, you know, said some version of, how dare you? You know the story. Why would you even think about this? So there definitely is still some bad blood out there, and we need to repair that trust.
Yeah, you've already started this sharing of technology with this new NG system, which is huge. You're sharing technology with Starcom, even though it's coming out of 2 different budgets. You're getting on the same page. The next logical thing, and I skipped over it here because I do want to be brief. I know you've got a lot of other things on your agenda that I skipped over, was you can still share some things. You can share training. You can coordinate your training with new employees. So you're training the employees and the new people you bring in the same techniques, you know, and there's a cost you can share in training by doing that. Instead of sending 1 or 2 people or bringing somebody in to train one person, you've got 6 people or 4 people, whatever the case may be, and you can bring an APCO trainer in or a NENA trainer in. By the way, NENA stands for the National Emergency Number Association. And they set the standards. NENA sets the standards for NG 911, Enhanced 911, and how things should be handled. That's one of their charters. So you have an opportunity here with these 2 centers to increase the use and increase the kind of technology across the board between 2 agencies, because there's a commonality. You're dealing, if you're a police department, you deal with the same guy. They don't know what city they're in when they do a burglary or they running a DUI. It's transparent. We deal with the same people regardless of where they're from, county or city.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Alderman Sage, and then Schmidt and Black.
Mike, let me say first, thanks for your presentation, because it was very informative. And I was glad that, because I jotted some notes, I was glad to see you touch on some of the what I would characterize as low-hanging fruit here around the training, you know, in terms of some next steps that we could take between the city and Metcom. because that seems to be a real common sense approach, and again, something that should involve a lot of planning around it. I would think that would seem, apparent to folks about that. Let me ask you a couple questions. In terms of the appointment to the board, the ETSB, what have you seen, and just speak generally, because I know that's what the scope of the study was, kind of a best practice from a board reappointment and a board planning. I mean, have you seen anything? Because I guess I always start with the notion that to not have any turnover on any appointed board at some point creates some real organizational and cultural issues.
Correct.
And so have you seen anything, again, maybe just a best practice or two in the
Well,
management?
I can't say there's best practice, but you made a good point in that even in the county I'm from, in Rock Island County, because I was on that ETSB, and the people I served with initially, by and large, the same people are there. And that in and of itself, they've done a good job, quite frankly, I'll be honest with you. They've done things the way we intended. Of course, we started the whole thing, but they buy technology as far as CAD systems, radio systems, and whatnot across the board, comes out of the ETSB, and they support all that stuff. But there's still, I can see in that board where there's some old thought processes that are still in place. They really need a fresh look on the board. And I think, a 3-year term probably isn't long enough, but if you're there for 6 or 8 years, it's time to change things over, because there's a mindset. And I think one of the issues you have here, you've got great people on the board in McLean County, but they have a different mindset because most of them come from the smaller communities. And they're great people. You have volunteer fire guys, you have small police department guys, and you can't say enough good things about them because they're volunteers. I've dealt with them all over the country, and they're universally some of the most dedicated folks you'll ever find. But their view of the world is very myopic because they're not dealing with what Bloomington deals with. They don't see what your needs are, and they don't truly understand them. They understand that, a fire, they understand a brush fire that you typically are not going to deal with here. And that's part of the issue I think you may have, and I'm not criticizing ETSB, please understand that. I'm not throwing a rock at anybody. But you get into myopic and you get into a routine, and you tend to stick with it. And it's just like you have a new mayor, you have old mayors, and you have different opinions and different approaches. It's not necessarily, well, there's never really a good or a bad, A good friend of mine was mayor in Moline for 15 years, and I told him it was too long. You need to get the heck out of there. And it's not that he was doing a bad job. He was doing a good job. But it's the same view of the world.
Right. And so, and to your point, it's not an indictment of folks who serve on these boards and commissions. It's simply, I'm not sure how you start to kind of move the effort forward if you don't have some systematic turnover on some of those oversight boards and advisory boards.
Yeah, well, that's up to
absolutely
you folks.
Yeah, I'm trying to just highlight a point.
But the county board controls it because that's the way it was put together.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So that's where the discussion needs to take. And I hesitate to even say it, but because you don't want to bring up history, because the history is just that, it's history. From my perspective,
right.
My concern and the concern of your public safety people here is providing good service, the best service they can to the citizens, regardless if they're in the county or in the city of Bloomington or they're going to Normal. Their concern is providing emergency services as fast and quickly as they can,
right.
And as effectively. And so I have a tendency to look way beyond that stuff and say it's not important, but it is.
And thank you. And Mike, the other thing is, if you can you kind of lay out the flow of the surcharge that people in Bloomington, residents in the city of Bloomington, pay? And I think it's a $1.25. I think
it's $1.25 countywide.
Yeah, and so that money goes to the ETSB. Mm-hmm. Okay, which made sense when Bloomington and Normal and the county all shared in Metcom.
Correct.
Right. But with the decision to withdraw from Metcom, and I think it was alluded to, but again, maybe worth mentioning again, when that decision was made, the previous city manager and or previous, or the chief of police at that time, shrewdly didn't negotiate any process for any of that revenue to flow back to the city from ETSB.
There wasn't a vehicle in place or methodology in place to allow that to happen.
Okay.
Just as an FYI, we actually, the city paid extra
Yeah,
To get out.
get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got that number someplace, actually.
So basically then, we have folks who are, I'm trying to just kind of get an overall perspective here. Is it safe to say that with that arrangement that was made, is the city, are the residents of Bloomington now basically subsidizing Metcom
Yes,
without getting any revenue back from ETSB?
Correct. That's where the heartburn is. That's where the heartburn is.
Yeah.
From an ETSB county perspective, there's no heartburn there. They're
Yeah.
coming out ahead somewhat. But in fairness to them, the ETSB has paid for your last set of logging recorders, I believe, correct, Darren? And the NG 911 gear, that 320 grand's coming out of ETSB funds that are being contributed, the citizens of Bloomington contribute to. The personnel costs have never been part of that funding
Right.
queue. Like I said before, we said equipment. And same with the radio stuff. Different counties and different ETSBs have made different decisions on how they fund radio stuff. Some counties have paid for radio systems out of those funds. When we wrote this, didn't want that to happen, but the boards are autonomous and they could do it. Currently, I think you're paying for your own Starcom costs, and I believe county's paying, or Metcom's paying for their own Starcom costs, which is fine. But the things that could share, and the things that I know that we share the cost of, or the ATSB pays for in like Rock Island County. The CAD system that you have, they bought the same CAD system they all agreed on collectively, and that's all paid out of ETSB funds. The mobile data into cars, that software and that technology is paid out of ETSB funds. That's the synergy that I think I would like to see for the benefit of everyone in this area come across. Personnel issue is one thing. I'd stay out of that. But the technology, if you could get to a point where you can share those costs out of the ETSB funding, that was the purpose of the funding legislation, was to purchase that stuff for the good of everyone.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Alderwoman Schmidt and then Black.
I think Alderman Sage asked a lot of the questions I wanted to ask, but I want to follow up just on a couple of points. Could you quantify how much of our dispatch center is actually based in technology? I mean, if we were recouing ETSB money, how much might that be?
I wasn't tasked to go that far into it. I have an idea of some of the technology, like your CAD system could have been funded. You've got an incredibly good CAD system. You have one of the better ones in the country, quite frankly. Could have been funded by ETSB funds.
Right. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah,
I heard
well,
that one.
yeah.
And if it were a different world and we had not separated from Metcom, and now we find ourselves with, I forget what the name of the new standard is, which we are actually really meeting, like, very well, we would be looking at developing what we have now.
Or if you were to try and merge
Yeah,
with them again,
if the past had not happened and we wanted to really create the standard that we are now at, how far out, I guess I'm asking you, how far out of the loop are we?
You're quite, from a technology and operational standpoint, you're excellent. Bloomington is excellent, doing an excellent job.
I'm asking you a political question, it's a money question. So if we had to develop the standard that we are meeting, and we had, we just said, hey, we want to be where we are right now, I'm trying to imagine how different that budget would look. I mean, are we pretty much
you would
where
have
we
to,
would have ended up?
well, you would have to break out if you see the list of phone companies in there that are involved, you'd have to break out which citizens in Bloomington are served by which companies and get a head count, and that would give you an idea. Again, getting tasked with that and getting numbers from the phone company, quite frankly, we got a couple times. Well, I had to have Mr. Hale's office send a letter to Frontier authorizing me to ask them a question.
I see, yeah.
Well, and I get that, because it's a contractual arrangement between you and the phone company. But that's what you would have to do with all those to find out, and you have to get a map out. And they didn't, and I didn't want to go to that expense, quite frankly, because it's a minutia at this point. The bigger issue is, can you work together on a funding issue with the ETSB without going to that and starting to create an adversarial relationship again? Because I think all that's pretty much water over the dam.
Right, right.
Definitely is on the public safety side and the operational side, politics being what they are. I don't want to poke that bear.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. This was an excellent presentation. My question, I have a couple questions, and I guess a musing. I wanted to focus, though, on Section 5 of the report, where we talked about the next generation NG 911. And it was only in one sentence, but to me this is probably the key issue that I've heard feedback on, is that it says, under Phase 2 wireless systems, 911 are to be routed to Metcom. If the wireless call is located in Bloomington, the call is forwarded to Bloomington Communication Center. So where we're going, there will, in the scenario the mayor laid out earlier, there would be no transferring, correct?
There would be no what?
Transferring,
There
because
would
right now,
still, the phone would still ring over there first, but because you're a system, the transfer times that you currently are experiencing on a wireless call, I can't give you a number on how much faster it's going to be.
I guess, okay, I'm not necessarily looking for a number, but if, in the scenario he's laying out, he's having a heart attack, he makes a phone call, does it automatically go to somebody in Bloomington, or does he have to wait for a switch to kick it over?
Yeah, it automatically will go.
So from his perspective, he doesn't see any of that kind of back-end transferring. It's
So you're not gonna,
essentially...
you as the end user, you and the person making the call, it's going to be transparent to you.
Gotcha.
You're not going to have to go, hold on, we'll be with you in 20 minutes.
Right.
That's
No,
transparent.
I mean, because I've had to call 911 a number of times, and I get transferred every single time, and
I'm not saying that's not going to happen. Don't
Right.
misunderstand. But this new system makes that much more efficient. The dispatcher will probably, and again, I haven't been able.
So do I have to, I guess, I'm not...
I can't talk to Frontier and ask them the
Yeah.
questions or answer the questions, because I wanted to ask them myself.
Sure.
How are you going to configure your switch, or switches, or plural?
Gotcha.
Because I'm not their customer.
So in that case, my comment would be that when we move forward with any kind of project, it would have to have that instantaneous. If I'm calling from a cell phone, it goes right to the right person without having to explain where I am or who I'm transferring to. I think that's...
Eventually, pardon me, eventually that's going to happen with NG 911.
Right, but that's where we're going.
That's correct. This equipment would be capable of it, but it's going to be able to, it have to be able to take the XY coordinate, and not all cell companies have that capability built into the systems. Not all cell phones have that capability. It's much better now than what it was 5 or 10 years ago, obviously. But that isn't whole yet. Ideally, when that is capable, and all cell phone companies have that capability, that will take place. But that has to be included in the database.
Sure. Okay. And then my next question would be going back to kind of the funding mechanism. The way I was reading this in Section 2 is that it was stating that it was a wireline only $1.25 charge. Is that correct? So it was only wire. So if only I have a landline phone, I'm paying into that pool of money, correct? This would be on
Metcom.
this would be page 11 of your report. Page 11 of the report.
My understanding.
Well, I'm just looking at the PowerPoint. I didn't put
Oh,
that
gotcha.
whole thing
Okay.
on.
Well, let me ask in a higher level question, is that I only have a cell phone, and many residents are getting rid of their landlines. Is the funding mechanism for this unstable down the road? Is there going to be wireless surcharges at some point? Because I think
There's a wireless surcharge right now.
okay, good. I don't look at my bill.
There is a wireless surcharge right now. It's currently going to the state.
It goes to the state. So what percent of that comes?
What's your kickback on that?
Right now, the current wireless surcharge in the state of Illinois is 70%. That money is sent into the state of
Right.
Illinois, and then the state of Illinois reimburses counties based on a formula there. Metcom receives that funding monthly, and then dispersal from the state. The state at times runs behind. They don't always get those checks sometimes. That's how the wireless surcharge works.
That's what I thought.
So, as a Bloomington wireless customer, my 73 cents goes to the state. How much of that money comes back to Bloomington to provide service?
That's what he just said. It doesn't. It goes to the ETSB.
It goes to ETSB, so the same kind of problem that we're in right now.
Correct.
That 73 cents, that money then is divided up. The Illinois Commerce Commission
Gets a chunk.
gets a portion of that
Yep.
to maintain the program. Part of that goes back to the wireless carriers themselves
so they can continue to enhance the wireless technology.
Right.
And then what's left comes back to the ETSBs, and then that is dispersed through the various PSAPs.
Gotcha. Okay.
And for the purpose of this study, we didn't get down into those weeds.
I gotcha.
Okay.
I just, it's hard to draw a line of sight with some of the things the state of Illinois does. So especially, when it comes to things like this.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And as a consumer of someone who only has a cell phone, I don't want a landline. I know a lot of residents are getting rid of their landline, and I think that if we're going to have a program that maintains, and I know there's a lot of technology that goes onto the back end. I mean, you mentioned the video streaming, the text messaging services. That's all going to be a pull of data. We got to pay for it.
And all that kind of technology is built is where this NG stuff is going, so that you can send text messages and that. It isn't there yet.
Sure. And I guess my musing on this, and I apologize for taking so long, would be that you mentioned the New York example of how they're having to build I think it was the PSAC in their case, and they were doing number 2. Looking at kind of if we had gone down the model of staying with Metcom, back in the day, and we'd probably looking at having to do something similar at this point, correct, if we had gone down that route. The backup center, it has to be a mirror in every measurable sense, or is it just has...
It has to be functionally capable of handling the volumes that you experience. In other words, you could say, I've got a backup center, you put in a two-position PSAP out there. When you've got a 10-position dispatch center, you functionally cannot handle that call volume. You also have to have the capability of communicating to the units in the field. I mean, it's great to get the phone call, but what are you going to do with it when you get it?
Right. Right.
That's the other part of the equation, which is the other part of the issue with having some other county around you support you. One, they don't have the bandwidth and the people to take that volume. And two, are they on Starcom? Can you communicate with them, and vice versa? It's a whole package, and that's the issue.
Sure, and I guess my musing for the council would be something to the effect of if we were to go back with Metcom, and there may be some cost savings that go along with that, as opposed to having two different centers, if we have to have that mirror type situation that we need to have to meet the standard, there could be some cost savings down the road, but that's my musing. So thank you so much.
All right.
Sure.
Alderman Lauer, Maboka, and Stearns.
Okay, from a
Go ahead.
from a hardware perspective here, we've talked about all the incoming calls. But if we're a dispatch center and we've got two different dispatch centers, we've got outgoing radio transmissions.
Sure do.
Okay, obviously there's a big differential between what Bloomington City can do and what the county can do. I assume that we're talking about line of sight still here, right?
Yeah, again, for purposes of this study, I didn't really get into that.
Right.
And part of the issue is it's straightforward to digest the information I get out of a New World CAD system. That data is broken out really well. The Metcom system is considerably different, and what they call things is considerably different, and how they rank them. So to quantify calls in a manner that would be equitable, we weren't going to get that detailed in this study, because tried to do it as cost effectively and keep the hours down to a minimal, and that would have been like getting into the budget issues and personnel issues.
But that's still going to be expensive. We are required to back up Metcom.
That's what I'm saying.
That's something that we haven't even touched here.
You can you can't. You have the capability of backing up Metcom today on an as-needed basis. You have not. You've done that actually, Darren, on occasion when they've gone down and vice versa. Correct?
Yes, that is correct. Can you rephrase the question again for me?
So, well, from a hardware standpoint, is our tower capable of reaching a county officer or one of the rural fire protection agencies on our peripheral?
Yeah,
at the county level.
Yes, our Starcom, the radios that are in use are good countywide. We're on the same exact
So we've got the repeaters, we've got line of sight.
Right.
We don't have to, okay.
Yes,
We wouldn't have to go out and purchase additional equipment to...
No. We could back, if they had a catastrophe out there tonight, we could take over their communications on a countywide basis. That's police and fire and emergency medical as well.
And that's the beauty of the setup that you currently have. You're in a better position here than what they are there. they're limited space-wise. They've got
Of course, unfortunately, there were years where we had the outdated analog system and they were on Starcom, but now we're all together.
yeah.
Okay, and then looking on into the future, from what you know of the technology that's coming down the road, where is this going to be affected at all, or, in terms of the hardware upgrades?
Well, when we're talking about Starcom, you're on the front edge, leading
Okay.
edge, so to speak. Starcom, the state of Illinois is going to continue to grow the network. They continue to bring more users on, which is just going to make it that much more robust and increase the interoperability capabilities. The new NG911 system is designed at the bottom end to grow with technology, because with the things that they were looking at, like in New York, they're looking at taking text messages and video from people. They're not doing it, don't misunderstand, unless that's changed in the last period of time. Taking video into the comm center and being able to pass that on. Not doing that, but that's the intent of going as technology goes, to be able to deal with different types of ways of 911 or emergency services or emergency calls coming in.
Thanks.
Alderwoman Stearns, and then Millawamboy.
Couple of, I think, very simple questions. Thank you for your report. The purpose of this study that you've completed was to determine if a more extensive evaluation is warranted to explore the possible reintegration of Bloomington and Metcalf. Is it warranted?
I'm not going to go there.
Oh, you're not going there? Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather not.
Okay.
You can study it till the cows come home.
Okay.
Myself, I don't see the need. My personal opinion is, be quite honestly, I'm not evading your question. As a consultant, I'd say, oh yeah, we need to study this more. Go ka-ching, ka-ching. No, I don't believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's clear enough in my mind that the way you're currently configured is the optimal way for you to be configured, where you have two good centers, you take care of each other, you back each other up. The issue I think that you need to deal with is to work out issues with the ETSB and the county on how funds may be distributed.
Okay.
That's
Gotcha.
where I
Understand.
think
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And for David, as you mentioned, ka-ching, ka-ching with consultants, and that's, we all know that. What was the total cost of the study, this particular study, David?
I think it's about $5,000.
In that neighborhood?
So
Okay.
extremely low.
Okay.
And look what we got. I mean, I couldn't believe Mike would take that much.
Right.
That
And
little.
and just a quick comment. Because I've been asked by a lot of citizens about this. We're 5 years, much more than that, 7, 8 years into this separation. And a lot of people are very, very deeply vested in what they've built and what they have, and what their jobs are and all of that. So, I think that we are so far along here that really looking at doing such a drastic thing as going back is an extremely, it's a very difficult thing to look at because of the deep, deep investment of so many people. So interesting. Wonder, you come from a public safety background, obviously. Police officer, is that right?
Yep. 40 years worth now.
Yeah. What other, if any, specialists or specialty groups, if there are any, actually look at and evaluate, other than public safety officers or people who come out of a public safety background? Are there economists, or are there city management people who look at these kinds of things and give you answers?
You could bring in people like Deloitte Touche to look at the numbers and run numbers for you. Arthur Anderson will run numbers for you. Gartner Consulting. I used to work for Gartner.
Right.
My hourly rate at Gartner was $450 an hour.
Sure. And I'm not saying that's even practical. But I think, you have to clearly look at, and since we first had the meeting in council, we had some small meetings with the police chief, the fire chief, the dispatch center chief, and you look at, public safety people, and it's clear, it's very, very clear that they have a established, ownership of what is going on, and that's a factor, no question. So I think, it's really, at this point in time, it's just really, really difficult. Thank you.
Alderman Millawamboy.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I really enjoyed it. And it sounds like at this point the argument is political, right? And that's what we have to
But
try
that's
to
not necessarily political. Like I said, I look beyond the politics. I look at what's best operationally.
Okay.
If I lived here, how would I want my calls handled? If my mother lived here, how would I like to see it structured? Or if I worked here, for that matter, how would I like to see it structured? I don't look at politics are always going to be what they are, but yeah, primarily what you're dealing with here is a funding issue and trying to get shared funding from the ETSB or from the county to get some of that kickback to you, or have them funding additional technology in your center. And I use the example of the CAD system or mobile data, have them pick up the funding and the maintenance costs and the software upgrades from the ETSB funds, then you're getting the same benefit.
Okay. And so I guess how would you, and I know you didn't necessarily want to get into this, but I would like to see from your perspective and what you've seen done in the past, how would you suggest that we go about negotiating this funding? Because I mean, it seems to me that we've been a pretty good neighbor, right? Because we've backed them up.
Well, that's true. And you have been good neighbors. You've been good to each other and you've worked well together. But memories are long. Emotions were very strong. I know when I first got involved here, there's some people that had been here when the divorce took place. And it was very much like a divorce, quite frankly. And some of those people are still entrenched. I don't know about, I don't think on this side of the wall. You were involved at the county, obviously, so you probably...
Yeah, we use the term divorce.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was very obvious when I had my initial meetings. It was an ugly divorce. But nonetheless, how you approach that negotiation is extremely important. And I think that you have to be very sensitive to the history that's gone on. And even though you're probably new council members and you weren't here when that took place, the people I think that are still on the ETSB have been there from day one, or at least a number of them. They have ownership. They have a lot of ownership. And I understand that. I truly do. Because they worked very hard to get the funding in place, and Bloomington thumbed their nose at them, to be figuratively, at that point in time, and say, we're not interested, we don't want to play.
It's even more vile than that, but I get you.
But in essence, there's some very, very raw feelings that aren't going to go away. So how you negotiate this is with someone who's been on the county board to work with people in the board, and maybe approach it to say, maybe we need to put time limits on board members at some point. Have you thought about that? Maybe some of them even want to get off the board, but who do you put on? Yeah, I don't know the politics in Bloomington County. Don't want to. Because it's a no-win for someone in my position. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to go down that road, but how do you negotiate it? You know the politics and you know the people involved. I don't. And I think the best way to do it is not do it officially. You have a beer with them sometime and you just start talking things out on a friendly basis, however you do it. But I wouldn't do anything formal. I wouldn't try and approach them in an adversarial environment where, okay, this is what we're going to do. That's your call. That's why you're the alderperson and I'm standing here.
Anything else, Maboka?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And very, very informative. I appreciated your knowledge on this. This was really great. Thank you so much. Thanks. And we will move right along.
Mayor, if I could, one of the things I started off with, either tonight or another time, what we'll be looking for is from the council some direction. And again, I'm not saying you need to give that tonight, but again, as we talked recently, it is really going to be helpful for myself, on what you would recommend, what direction the majority wants to give us. We brought you the study, so if you want to now take it under advisement at some point in time, we can get back together.
I think it's probably fair. We've heard a lot of information. I think for us to absorb this, to figure out what, as Maboka had asked, what strategies, where do we go next? So I think we can begin to have those conversations, and then we'll, as quickly as we seem to have a consensus on the council, maybe get back, either talk about this again in public, or we'll maybe have private work groups or whatever, but we'll absolutely give you that feedback. Well, what would be helpful for you, Mr. Hales? What time frame are you, would be best for you?
Well, I think one, it is, and again, now this is kind of the inaugural public release of this document. I'm already in discussions with the town of Normal manager, the McLean County administrator, and, you know, there will be other kind of informal, but at some point in time, we'll have to decide, should we proceed for, you know, to have further discussions with the ETSB board in a more formal manner, or even informal, things of that nature. So I think, you know, coming back within 30 days or something like that would be helpful, you know, for you publicly to at least, you know,
So we
kind of
might have this
indicate
on
what direction you want the city manager and staff to
Before the end of
proceed.
the year, perhaps have it on another item where we have some time to revisit this. And then we can
Except
do
that
some
in
other.
December, we won't have a committee of the whole.
We
But
won't,
anyway,
right.
you know, then or even into middle of January.
Middle of
So just
January,
wanna
okay.
leave it.
And then, and I've obviously, you know, I've had continuing conversations with Coos well over a year about this and these kinds of issues. And, you know, again, we'll have to move from those informal conversations to something that's a little bit more serious. So, anyway, thank you very much. We move on to another non-controversial topic, and that's item 6B, user fees, liquor license, and video gaming terminal fees. And Mr. Hales, you have about 15 minutes of an introductory presentation.
And I'll probably
You wanna do?
take less than that, but
Okay.
I think the main emphasis tonight was just to allow the alderman and the mayor to talk about these two topics, liquor license fees, video gaming terminal fees, you know, that as the mayor has been talking about, and even the Liquor Commission. So I think tonight is for the governing board to continue that discussion. What I wanted to do is take a few minutes and just introduce again this topic of user fees, fees and service charges, and give you some insight as to where I think we are now and where we need to go. Keep in mind that, you know, historically taxes, property taxes, even in the very beginning, you know, was a major source, and other taxes to fund a variety of services. Yet over time, as governing boards determined and saw that, you know what, taxes aren't sufficient because for various reasons, and hopefully as you looked in these articles, you know, for various reasons, there began to be fees and service charges issued. Take our water fund or sewer fund, storm water fund, solid waste fund. Basically, these became so-called business units. And the philosophy and the policy was that whatever it took to provide this service to those customers who are receiving the service, you know, the fees need to be sufficient to cover the full cost. If you're not receiving the service, you know, and we do have some homeowners that don't receive sanitary sewer service. They don't pay a sanitary sewer fee because they're not on that. Some people have their own water system, et cetera, or solid waste. So, but over the years, as fees and service charges became very much a mainstay of many municipal programs and services, then also what developed is a little in the way of best practices, and that's, if I can emphasize that tonight. As you saw, and I provided to you this West Jordan ordinance, one of the best practices around, I think, across the nation is to have, ultimately, our council adopt a user fee revenue cost comparison policy. We do not have that now. The benefit of having some sort of policy is, among other things, to establish why do we have each and every fee that we have established, what's the purpose of the fee, because with the purpose of the fee, you get into the second component is how do you determine the costs, because the costs of the service and determining what's direct costs, what's indirect costs, whether or not it's a full cost recovery, partial, all that comes into play. What we want to avoid is being so arbitrary and capricious, if you use a couple of terms lawyers like to use, that there isn't necessarily any rhyme or reason as to why we have this fee, and that puts you and I and our staff and the public in a bad position. So ultimately, I see down the road, we need to work on developing that policy and doing a very comprehensive review of all our fees and services charges, making sure it is very clear and very simple as to the purpose of the fee, whether or not we're going to seek 100 full cost recovery or not. And believe me, there is some areas in the city, it's like some of our recreation programs or some of our parks programs. I think public policy decisions sometimes are, we will only seek maybe 50%, or 25% of cost recovery. But those are ultimately governing board decisions after we come back to you with the analysis so you can see the costs, but also what are some of the benefits of that. And then going forward, it is imperative that once you adopt a fee, and I think this is definitely going to be the discussion on the liquor license fee, you want to have an ongoing continuous program to update those fees if the costs continue to increase. And if the policy is full cost recovery, if our costs go up 10%, you want to have a mechanism to increase those fees so that, again, the policy of full cost recovery continues to be achieved, in the years ahead as inflation continues to have an impact on labor, supplies, commodities, and capital costs and things of that nature. And then secondly, as you also have new fees come into existence, we have a foundation, a policy, something to say, okay, if we're going to have a new fee, we have to have this information adopted so that there is clarity of the purpose and what you want the full cost recovery methodology is going to be used. And last but not least, I think there is, and this, as I talked with Jeff Jurgens, our corporate counsel too, many states, maybe not always necessarily Illinois, but even here in Illinois, there is a strong basis that oftentimes when you're going to have a fee and you want to have kind of full cost recovery, sometimes you want to allow those who are paying the fee be able to at least know that is this fee unreasonable? Is it unfair? Are you charging double, triple, 5 times what the cost of that particular program is that should be funded solely by the fees and service charges? So from a defensive standpoint, on an ongoing basis, I think municipalities have adopted good best practices that these policies, these procedures, the methodology, keeping them updated, also, perform a very valuable role in helping make sure that if we are challenged, and I think that's especially true in the future when we start looking at development impact fees, you have to make sure that your investment into establishing those fees is very defensible and that we can, even in the communication and seeking the cooperation, the collaboration with special interest groups, there's a lot to be said of as we start down this road, let's have them at the table because they need to be part of the solution of how do we fund the many programs and services, especially when the beneficiaries are maybe few, and not necessarily representative of the entire city. And these kind of best practices is what we need to be about considering. Now, my last comment is over the last 6 years, we have not had the capability, the personnel, necessarily the priority that this should be a focus going forward. But I know recently in this past year, there was more and more desire on the part of the council that the day is coming when we need to establish this as a priority, make sure that you provide us with the resources to deliver and help ensure that we get up to date on some of these important policies and practices that, are related to user fees. So with that, again, I just wanted to lay that foundation and indicate we, as a city, have a long way to go to get where we need to be in this particular category. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn back to you and the council, the discussion of these other
Just to
two
give you
topics.
a little bit more background, I think everybody knows sort of the general background, but just to review it and for the record and for those in the audience. The Liquor Commission has been talking about, liquor license fees, video poker only recently, but liquor license fees for a very long time, long before I was mayor. Former Mayor Stockton and others talked about this, and there was no action. There were no decisions. There were lots of proposals, lots of things thrown around. Nothing really happened. We have talked about it for a little over a year, and in fact, including former Mayor Stockton stayed on for a few months as Liquor Commissioner, Member Tompkins, and then Commissioner Jordan. And at the last meeting, we had decision, or not decision, but begin to talk about would we make a recommendation to the council to begin the process. And there was no consensus, and this was among, we're down to 3 liquor commissioners, so there was no consensus about what level to go forward with. And I would also, just to clarify, I think the discussion at the Liquor Commission has been, not just over the last year and a half since I've been mayor, but in the past, a mixture of dialogue. Some of it along the tactics that our city manager talked about, and that is user fees, cost recovery. Some of it has been along the lines of not so much the latest liquor commission, but previous liquor commissions, and I think a Pantograph editorial recently, sin taxes. And so the nature of this has kind of been mixed a little bit. The data that we had was not so much internal cost recovery, because that would be a very, very difficult thing. When I was in the county, I think we spent $80,000 or $80,000, $90,000. This is about 12, 13 years ago, doing a complete fee analysis. So the county does different things than we do. But it was a couple of things. We certainly looked at other communities and liquor license fees in other communities, certainly video poker fees in other communities. And for a city our size, I mean, nobody is as low as we are, meaning zero on video poker. And our liquor license fees have not increased since 1982. Those were some of the things that were discussed. Now, in terms of costs, we did have a gentleman who spoke, who's left since during our citizen comments, that did mention something about, we had a police officer who said, have you been called on something specifically related to video poker? Well, no, I don't know that we would expect anybody to be, I mean, what would you say? This machine doesn't work, the machine hit me. You know, I don't know what it is that the video poker machine would do to cause a police incident. But I can tell you, we have an appeal right here, not in downtown, so this isn't the downtown bar's fault. This is an appeal from Aaron's Restaurant. We spent 3.5 hours and going back and forth on this. We had to have someone who was a court reporter. We had to have legal counsel from Springfield. Now that they're appealing, we have to deal with the Liquor Commission, and we're going to have appeal costs, et cetera. We have lots of costs, not just police officers, not just buyback, not just equipment, not just breathalyzers, all things that have gone up. Our attorney's costs have gone up, all kinds of things. And frankly, I think it's pretty safe to say since 1982, the cost of liquor administration has been borne by the city taxpayers. You know, so now, does the idea of video poker machines, what's the cost of that? Again, it would be very, very difficult to analyze that or tickle that through in the short or long run. I can tell you here, we had no problems in 4 years before 2 things happened: liquor license and video poker, and it was not a good mix in this particular institution. Now we have many that are, right? I mean, we've got Copper Top, we've got Schooners, some places, I don't know if Schooners has video poker, but anyway, certainly places that are neighborhood establishments where we don't have problems. But the fact that we've got lots of neighborhood establishments that don't have problems doesn't mitigate the fact that we've got many that do. And frankly, the police video on this, as part of the 3.5 hours on this particular incident, was pretty scary. I wouldn't have wanted to be there even inside the cop car, even if I had a semi-automatic weapon, given the number of people who were outside on the street. So there are definitely incidents. We've also had the Lucky Garden incident with twerking. That's when I learned about what twerking was. This is before Molly Cyrus. This was a year ago in July. And that video situation, over 200 people coming out of Lucky Garden, in a sense, descending on Denny's, and clearly they're drunk, maybe they're high, I don't know what else is going on, but they clearly had some kind of party, and this stuff was pretty scary. So there are costs. Do I know what they are? I honestly don't know what they are, but they are non-zero costs to our taxpayers. Costs in police, in overtime, in breathalyzers, equipment, in cops, responding, in obviously our city staff time, in clerk and paperwork, and certainly in our attorneys and having to deal with this. And now outside legal counsel at $175, $200 an hour or so. And so there are real costs. What is the amount? I don't know. I certainly would leave it up to my colleagues to discuss the specifics of this. The Liquor Commission couldn't agree on either of these things. We have one commissioner who wanted immediately to up it 240%, which is the inflation rate since 1982. There were no others who supported that option. And so clearly we didn't have consensus. So that plus Alderman Sage and some others had contacted me and said, I kind of think I'd like to have the council talk about this really as a group, not we did a little bit in a retreat over a year ago, and we, here or there, not have these little peace conversations, but really bring it together. So I should not have talked as much as I did. I'll still allocate a half hour, roughly, for this. So I'd like to see who would like to speak to this, and I'm guessing I'm going to get a lot of lights. Okay, well, let me go ahead and start with, from my right to left, Alderman Lauer and Sage Stearns.
Well, Mayor, after a lengthy conversation with the proprietor yesterday, who I really doubt, he's had a liquor license for over 30 years, and I really doubt that he's ever had an emergency vehicle other than maybe for a heart attack at the establishment. I doubt that he's ever had a police car there. So a user fee, I think, would be much more palatable in some of those instances. One of the things that he wanted to highlight is that there's a considerable expense to going into some of these types of businesses. And when you look at it from the business standpoint, there is a cost structure to everything you do on a monthly, on a yearly, and maybe even a 5 or 10 year basis. Certainly from the recent advent of the video poker machines, those are not cheap. And I'm sure that they aren't a usable commodity that they would expense and depreciate over a 1 year period. So if we're looking at raising fees and raising a license fee, et cetera, on an annual basis, I would think that we'd have to give a period of time for that in terms of planning and in terms of maybe a graduated raise over a longer period of time so that some of these businesses that had not planned for that expense could accommodate that and maybe pass that on to the consumer. Thanks.
Alderman Sage.
I think I want to be able to speak a little bit more specifically, so I need just a little bit of help here. On the agenda, we see kind of three topics. We see a user fee, we see a liquor license, and we see the video gaming license terminal fee, I think is how that was presented. When we drill down into our pack a little bit more deeply, what I come across is the video gaming license terminal fee. And so I think it's always good for us to have some kind of general philosophical questions. Is the topic that we're trying to specifically have conversation about tonight, is it the video gambling terminal fee? Is that?
I think it's, as I understood, the materials that I've seen the city manager put together, this is a sort of a general conversation.
Okay.
And then these are two specific things that the Liquor Commission has been addressing for years.
Okay.
The liquor license fee and the video poker fee and the liquor license fee. There were many things that have been discussed. We did discuss at some point, I forgot where it was, maybe only raising liquor license fees. It's been a year and some ago for people downtown for possibly power washing it, right. Or maybe overall everywhere for the extra costs for our police buyback or whatever.
Okay. Well,
could I also just add that, again, on the liquor license fee, video gaming terminal fee, again, as I saw it, that's kind of still at a very high level.
Okay.
Yes, previously, Tracy had put together some information on video gaming, so we put it in there. But again, as staff, we're not making any recommendations.
Sure.
And we just wanted to, I know the request was made, just to have the council maybe at this high level talk about those two fees.
Okay, then let me, as briefly as I can, maybe touch on those two. Um, uh, One piece of information that's going to help me, I guess, make a more informed or have a more informed opinion about the video gaming license terminal fee is what the costs are associated to the city for the administration of those. And I think we've heard that at least at some level, we're probably not real sure that we have a lot of enforcement costs associated with that on the back end. So there's probably some front-end administration, but I didn't see that necessarily kind of called out. But I guess, and until I see that, I guess I want to resist the urge to kind of see the video gaming terminals have proved to be a significant revenue source for the city. And I guess I want to kind of resist that inclination, kind of like that moth being drawn towards a flame, right? When we see the revenues, that there becomes then an opportunity to gain more revenue or take more revenue based on the video gaming terminals. I want to see some cost information. I just don't want to automatically assume that I guess I'm not prepared to say that I'm in favor of any terminal fees yet until I understand a little bit more what the cost is associated with those. I mean, it looks to be a pretty self-supporting kind of process once they're in place. So if you're looking for some feedback, I guess I'd need more information about the cost of that before I'd want to continue the conversation about the terminal fees related to the liquor license. Again, and Mayor, I thank you for pointing out that I think that 1982 year is one that I hear coming up from time to time about when the last when those license fees were adjusted, but yet I also hear from different folks in the community that perhaps that they're not paying the same license fee that they paid in 1982. So what would help me is a little clarity around exactly the structure of those license fees right now, because sometimes it sounds as if folks are still paying the same fee they did in 82, although I hear differently from some of the small business owners. And so, again, what will help me to make a more informed decision will be some clarity around that license structure, some real specific examples rather than just kind of this philosophical conversation around fees not being raised since 82. Related to downtown, I think I've said this publicly, this principle of having folks pay for the services that they consume, I think is one that covers a lot of different situations in the city. And I guess for this police buyback that is specifically related to downtown, I'm not prepared to go and ask business owners all across the city to subsidize the cost of that when it is those downtown bar owners that are profiting from those large crowds and those big groups downtown. That doesn't seem to be a balanced approach, right? We would expect those owners downtown, because they are consuming more services via the police buyback, to pay for that, as opposed to trying to use that as some rationale to raise the liquor license fee for small businesses all across the city. So again, I'm trying to be as brief as I can because I know others, have things they want to say. But those three topics: video gaming fee, the liquor license, and specifically the downtown callback. Hopefully, I've offered some insight into kind of what I'm thinking. So appreciate that.
Mayor, could I just make one brief comment? I think it'd be helpful for the rest, and I just remembered one thing too, and I think one reason is the mayor has brought up these two topics. These two were also on the list back in April when you asked for ideas from the directors and the city staff. There was a list of additional, and I'll call them miscellaneous, potential revenue raising items. And I think as some of you may recall, liquor license fees was on that, and I think we also had video gaming, just because we saw that Normal has implemented. So I just for purposes of context, these were also in that list that I remember many of the council wanted to have some point in time we come back and have discussion. And then the last thing is, again, just so you understand, we have no current staff work going on either one of these fees. So again, I just wanted to make that clear. So,
Alderwoman Stearns?
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of have the same, I need a little framework here too. We are talking about liquor license fees and video gaming terminal fees. Is that what we're talking about? I just want to be sure I'm commenting on the right things for the feedback.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
okay.
on the agenda.
Well, I'll be happy to. And we're relating that to fairness, kind of pay for what you consume. Is that what we're doing? Kind of, or is that part of it? I think it is.
Well, again,
I've heard quite a bit about it, and I'll be happy to do that. There simply is absolutely no way to quantify what for instance, a liquor license holder or a video gaming holder would cost the city. I mean, it's not even remotely possible. I think it's kind of a strange discussion. I mean, if we want to talk about what our citizens are paying for each service, then we need to set up a little toll booth at each park that people go into because it's costing us. I mean, we just don't ask our citizens to pay for everything they're getting, period, nor should we, nor ever have we. So I don't really get that. But on the subject of liquor license, we've always had liquor licenses. Liquor licenses, I think, I mean, help me, somebody knows better. Liquor licenses have paid for the administration of liquor licenses and such forever. So we're talking about raising liquor licenses. Things do go up, prices do go up. Certainly, it wouldn't seem that there would ever be a call for some really substantial and sudden rise in any fee. I mean, that's very, in my view, it's very contrary to the concept of encouraging business. Now, these are small businesses, the restaurants and bars all across the city. They are small businesses. They pay food and beverage taxes. I believe they pay some sales taxes. They pay license fees. And food and beverage is, I think, has recently gone up and is relatively new. So we need a summary. We need a summary of all of the taxes that these small businesses pay. And then we need to remind ourselves that they employ literally hundreds of people. Our employment base, if you look, and if you're informed, you know that the service industry here in Bloomington is a very significant part of our employment base. And many of these servers and dishwashers and people who work, these kind of are, if you'll pardon a little expression, the working poor. They're not sitting at home collecting it, necessarily from the government. They are out there in these establishments working every day. And when we take away the profits and when we unfairly burden these small businesses, we're really taking it from, to some extent, from the working poor, from what they can afford to pay and what benefits they can afford to offer, and certainly maybe from their clients, although they know they cannot, they're at a price point that they cannot go beyond, because people will stay home and people can stay home. This is a discretionary kind of spending, and discretionary income is falling. No question about it. So I think we better think about these small businesses. Every single one of them would consume a different amount of city services. Certainly, no question. I've been saying for years, the downtown establishments, all you have to do is go down there on a weekend night, as I have done and ridden along with the police officers on numerous occasions, and I assure you, there's a tremendous amount of of city services going on. So how could it possibly be fair to ask one of our, let's just face it, a Luca Grill or somebody who, it's a priceless institution, and there are many of them all across the city. Where else can people go on a Saturday night? And we're going to burden them. We're going to, basically drive some of these people out of business, because the video gaming, by the way, I will say as well, it is totally free to the city, period. These establishments go in, or whatever they are, these machines go in, and this is pure profit to the city. I think currently some 500,000, 400,000 something, correct me please, is coming into the city for what? You know, and prior to this, I mean, to me, it is a social problem, but it's not a police problem. And it's a problem that we've always had because before we had legal machines, there was a very, very extensive amount of gambling going on. Now we're just getting our cut. Do I like it? No. Is it a reality? Absolutely. And I just, you know, I think I've said enough, but I really don't understand how we can possibly talk about fair user fees when the variety of places out there is, you know, is huge. And I don't think we should overburden these employers or the working poor, these businessmen who really have taken it on the chin with all of their food and beverage, all of their, you know, employee health care, I mean, on workers' comp in the state of Illinois, on and on and on. And there's only so much, really, that businesses can take. Thank you.
Again, we, just to keep a rough eye for the time, could roughly try to keep to about 3 minutes, please. Alderwoman Schmidt.
I will be brief, I promise you. Speaking about user fees in general, David, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think it's something that we've been interested for quite a long time and is very appropriate. I have no idea what all the fees are that we may be asking of people and how they may line up with the use of our staff or resources or whatever. And I appreciate the fact that we don't necessarily have the staff to dig into that right now. It seems to me that the initial inventory might be something that an intern from Wesleyan or ISU might do to
Just
help.
FYI, there is some information also that one already did collect for us.
All right, that's awesome. Regarding the liquor fees, I appreciate the fact that we need to probably do some adjustment. I don't think, though, that because we may have, I don't think an establishment like Alderman Lauer is talking about needs to bear the burden of the kind of establishment that the mayor referred to. It seems to me that we need to keep our fees adjusted to whatever our costs are associated with the responsible liquor license holder, and that someone who's exhibited irresponsibility with that license needs to pay dearly for that lack of responsibility. Finally, with the video gaming, as Alderman Sage said, I would really have to understand what is the cost to the city for a business to have a video gaming machine. And I would sum it up just by saying just because we can assess doesn't mean we should assess that fee. I don't quite get that. It would be hard for me to go to any business owner and say, yeah, we're going to charge you $500 because we can. I'd have to really be able to quantify that one. And so I hope that if we end up going down that road, that we really put some effort into understanding what cost that is to the city, because at the moment I'm not seeing it.
Alderwoman Howman.
Thank you. I spoke with two managers, one owner, one manager of businesses that have the video gaming, and they were both questioning the fact that just because we can, should we? And to go to Alderman Schmidt's comment, I have a couple of comments that are random, so don't look for a thread here. In our background information, it talked about the negative secondary effects of regarding social problems with video gaming, and I'm wondering, do we even consider that with liquor licenses? I mean, there's...
When I mentioned the concept of sin taxes, that's what it's a long classic, I mean, generations. You know, you've got people arguing that that's, there are direct indirect costs, and that those should be borne by people who, whatever, smoke or drink or have video poker or gambling. I mean, the taxes, for example, even in Las Vegas or Atlantic City are very high.
Yeah. But anyway, I didn't know that. I've never seen us consider that with a liquor license like it's listed on here. Is it possible to tie the retention of a license to whether or not people are current with their taxes, their business taxes? It might be an incentive to keep them moving along in that direction.
We have a few like that would be helpful.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. And the one gentleman I visited with today has taken the profits that they've received and done some really nice upgrades in their business. And they have been moving the money back into the business, which I think is a reflection on the organization. I'm sure that that there are some organizations that are just pocketing the money, but at least there's one out there that is using the money to better the organization. And then my final comment would be whether or not it's possible to poll the current liquor license holders and video license holders about what they believe would be fair in terms of, especially with the liquor, the lopsided use of city services.
Thank you very much. And let's see, in terms of the order in which I recognized you, Alderman Milwambwe, and then Black and Painter.
Black was,
Were you first?
yeah, he was first.
You're deferring to everybody here today.
I want to be polite, that's all.
Sure enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Mwambwe, for passing it over to me. A couple things here. So the user fees study, I think that is interesting concept. I wouldn't want to see us spend a whole lot of time. I think it's great for an intern to work on. I would rather, what I would envision it being is where we take a comprehensive look at all of the fees that we charge, and then it creates a line of sight for us to explain to the public why it's funded at this level. If it's 75% versus 100%, why it's that, and that be that framed discussion, and then that gives the council the opportunity to set the policy level with which it'd be funded. So if we're at 75%, if we want to move it to 100, that's something that we would decide. When it comes to the liquor licenses, I think that I'd really like to see some more punitive issues. I know that the commission has done a much better job of holding the feet to the fire of those who have violated their liquor licenses, and I think I'd like to see more of that. I would be open to a conversation about tempered increases. I know I've heard the year 1982 thrown around a lot. For reference, I was born in 1988, so yeah, it's pointing out there. The costs have obviously gone up since then, and they're obviously charging more for a shot today than they are from back then. I'm definitely sympathetic to the idea that we have a lot of small businesses in the community who are liquor establishments and who are not causing any problems per se. I mean, I love Western Tap. It's one of my favorite places in my ward, and I never gotten a single phone call about problems at Western Tap, and that's a neighborhood bar that's always things are happening there.
We've never had in the liquor commission anything.
Right, and so should we be dinging people who are behaving? Now, when I did my ride along with the police, it was very interesting to go into Elroy several times, and we busted underage girls, 3, 4 of them at a time. To me, that's a systemic problem. That's not only the underage person who's got the fake ID that's walking in, that's the bar that's letting them in too. And if I had my way, you'd be charging the person who's underage and the bar and the bouncer. Watch how fast everything goes away when you start holding everybody's feet to the fire. We knew where they were. We walked in and caught them, and this isn't something that's a secret. I'd like to.
You can charge the people, and that is part of our practice. It's just that it's sometimes a little more difficult to collect if they don't return because of their ordinance violations. That's what I understand from George Boyle.
It would be to me. It would be very interesting, and this is where if I'm a liquor establishment, if I'm posting how many fines I've received for underage drinking, that would be a deterrent to some of my potential customers, and you should be made aware that you're not running a business in accordance with what the community wants. And we can have safe and responsible establishments that make money, that do well, and we shouldn't get in their way. But those who are violating it should be held to the fire for it. It just makes a lot of sense to me. And I've been downtown. It can be a little bit of a frenzy in the evenings, and some of the policies that we've created help make it more of a frenzy than it needs to be. But to me, the first step is to really kind of hold the feet to the fire of people who are violating our policies. When it comes to the video gaming licenses, I love to gamble. Gambling is great, but we got to remember that it's based on losses. Those fountains in Vegas weren't built by winners; they were built by losers, right? And so when we collect these fees off of these machines, this is hard-earned money that people are losing, right? And for me to get behind this terminal fee, I guess I would look to the free market on this. We're saying it's X amount of dollars per machine. What would it cost for a business owner who currently has these video games to get rid of one of their machines? So let's say that they are on the margins, and we impose a fee.
I think it's pretty clear from everything that anyone that I've talked to who's in the industry and other mayors and other people, Commissioner Jordan who's been in it, if we charged $5,000 a machine, they wouldn't get rid of them because they're extremely lucrative.
It's just,
Yeah.
I've done a lot of field research at a number of bars in the community, and I've noticed that the slot machines and the video poker very rarely is booked up where there's a line to it. It always seems like there's several empty ones. So I would want to know that if I'm a small business owner and I have to get rid of one of these machines in order to pay for this fee to make my profits even, whether that be the case or not, that they're making money off of it, that we're not overburdening somebody for doing that. So that's how you can get my support on that, and I appreciate your time.
And let's see, then we go to Alderman Milowambwe and then Alderwoman Painter.
Okay, thank you. Interesting conversation. I guess my, where I'm coming from, I would go with the philosophical discussion first about these fees, that we're looking to increase eventually, because I think the public needs to understand, why they would be charged one fee or another, or, have it increased. Because at this point, I think, we start to get into specifics and people start to give you arguments why a fee should not be increased, and I think precisely it's because they don't understand, what it is that you're charging them for. So take, for example, the video terminal fee. In my opinion, at least at this point, I'm not aware that we've demonstrated maybe a gambling issue, or any negative effect. There may be, but I don't know that we have demonstrated that. So to me, it would be premature, to make that leap and start charging a fee and using, those issues as a reason for doing that. So I think we need to spend a little bit more time to talk about the philosophy in general and then educating the public going from there. There were also a couple of other things. City manager, you talked about needing some resources in order to be able to move forward with the study. So I wanted to know what those resources would be, how much time you would need to be able to accomplish that.
The brief answer to that, I think we could benefit similar to what the county did by have an entity come in and to do a very comprehensive evaluation of all our fees and service charges. Help us look at those costs, identify the costs, compare those with the fees, as well as help provide that opportunity for the council to ultimately weigh in too. Which fees should be 100% cost reimbursement, and which should be something less than that. Usually with a company like that, then they can also, as we have a staff member or some additional help, then our hope would be, as with the additional resources, we could maintain those going forward to help make sure that they comply with whatever policy the council might adopt as to how frequently those fees should be reviewed and the costs reviewed to determine if there should be a change in the fees. So you might recall there was a fee and service charge study in the recommended budget last year, but as I was talking to finance and trying to identify, was that still in the budget? We're still working on that, but I think there is some money that could be made available to undertake such a study, to help get us started. Because in the 6 years I've been here, I don't know of any, justice we've done, to really doing the kind of cost evaluation on some of these fees, other than solid waste. As you know, there has been in the last year concerted effort. The council responded, took some action. Now, as you know, we've got to come back and have a follow-up discussion as to where the trend of that fund is going, based on the actual experience as opposed to projected, which we've seen some differences in. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Painter.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the licensing fees that haven't been raised for 32 years. That seems like a long time. Is that really the case? Or have there been
That's absolutely the multiplier, that, from what I understand, and again, there may be some particular people, if they've changed licenses, maybe that's what has happened. Our understanding that we have heard from staff, right, that you pay exactly the same dollar amount. Obviously, you pay more for your employees or shots or beer, whatever. I mean, everything's gone up. Our liquor administration costs have gone up. We don't know what that is without obviously a lot of study. So if there's some people who have contacted many of you who think that they're paying more, we can figure out why. It's very likely that they have changed their license of some form. But just in raw dollars, when I talked to the bar owners a couple times, downtown bar owners, and I think it was recently as last January, and a couple of them who weren't terribly happy with me. And we went through it, and I said, this is something that's on the table. Nobody disputed that they were flat since 1982. So again, there may be a little bit of a rumor mill by one or two people who maybe don't understand, or maybe they changed license types. Then that would affect how much you pay. Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could too, maybe, to further answer, as I've seen it, and I've heard the same thing, it's been years and years, but as I've also seen the costs in workman's compensation when we have officers who are injured on fights that spill out of taverns, into the streets, as I've seen, some of the total costs, the downtown hire back costs, my gut tells me, is that we are not recovering the full costs, and direct and indirect costs of what we are dealing with as a municipality in the impact, of, say, just take downtown taverns. The fee that is there is, sorely, below, I think, what those costs would be. Now, again, we haven't tried to go out there and undertake that. We'd want the council, kind of direct us. But, yeah, I think we just continue to be dismayed that, the revenue coming in is, probably has no resemblance to maybe the true cost of what we have to deal with in the services that have to be provided.
Well, as far as the downtown hire back goes, couldn't we have the bars that are having all the problems pay for their own police hire back? I would hate to make everybody pay for
And again,
that,
it's a complex issue because, some of those, a lot of the problems, once we start dealing with it, now, I'm just thinking of out in the street, in the public right-of-way, yes, that's when a lot of our police get involved. And the mayor, as the liquor commissioner, and the liquor commission also have a lot of issues on what happens inside the bars, and their compliance with all kinds of rules and regulations and things like that, which there probably isn't a very strong level of service being provided just because we don't have the resources, nor do we have the revenue to kind of cover. I think in that downtown neighborhood, downtown nightlife report, for the first time we got looking at occupancy loads, and we found all kinds of occupancies that are totally probably different from what the reality is out there. But again, it's just another indication of just very minimal resources to address what can be. If we truly wanted to regulate these to an adequate level, the revenues wouldn't even be, adequate to cover those costs.
well, are they liable for what happens on the sidewalk and in the alley behind their building?
I bet if Jeff was here tonight, he would say, probably unlikely. I mean, just take that issue of if someone goes out that door and is drunk, yeah, there's state laws that provide some immunity. How often do you find, prosecution that helps go after, some of the, sadly, sometimes the fatality, serious injuries
to say,
that
if
go
you've got well over 1,000 people, conservatively speaking, on a night, when I was out with the police, they have to do triage. I mean, somebody's urinating in the back alley or whatever, they may yell at them, or they just go on to something else, or a fight or whatever. So we don't have the resources to effectively deal with 1,000, 2,000 people who leave those bars at a particular time. But I also want to highlight, in terms of the violations, the vast majority of the violations are not downtown right now. And I don't mean that there's not action downtown, but I mean in terms of our problems lately are not downtown. So it is liquor sort of generally. We do have some great, institutions who are never problems, right? But unless we have a fine structure that is so massive that we put somebody out of business, we're not going to capture that with the bad people, right? I mean, the $14,000 fine, that doesn't even touch. Maybe that, I don't think it was, as I recall, it wasn't even 2 weeks of a hire back. When I had the $14,000 fine, every single bar owner of a liquor license talked to me within like 9 days after the issuance of that fine. And they wanted to know what was up, right? And that seemed to have helped. Again, that doesn't mean downtown is stable, but I think it's comparatively stable. Again, some of the more outrageous stuff I was noting was out at Lucky Garden and at Eric's, of the stuff that I physically, have seen. I'm sorry to clarify too much, but
Thank you.
let's see. I think that was everybody. Okay. At this point, we've had our first discussion. I'll bring this feedback to the Liquor Commission. I doubt, frankly, I think at the end of the day, with this council, we're going to have to really make the decisions and do things here. You're not going to get much, I don't think, helpful feedback from the Liquor Commission right now. And I think at this point, it's really more of a policy-making thing that we really need to wrestle with ourselves. And so I'll report back to the Liquor Commission that I doubt we will, it's a good idea for us to even consider making a recommendation to the council, because at this point, I think there's so many issues here that the council needs to wrestle with. Jim, did you have was your light on? I missed it. Okay. All right.
Just one real short question.
Sure.
Is there a way that we could kind of pull some of the other municipalities such as Champaign, Bradley University area bars, in Peoria, et cetera, so that we've got some idea of what they're doing with some of their problems?
Oh, yes, and I think our downtown nightlife study, and I can make that available to you, brought in a lot of that type information. So I think that might be, there may be a time in the future you want to kind of revisit that and see if there's any further policy action
and I
or
think
direction
Mayor Don
you wanna
Gerard,
give
I know,
us.
I've talked to him of Champaign. I'm sure he'd be willing to come to talk to us, to kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what they've done and how they've also revitalized their downtown, but he offered that, but I'm sure he'd come to talk to us about liquor problems as well. So anyway, well, at that point, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Stearns. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Mayor Renner,